Hello, Sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be obviously talking about Diego Maradona, MLS Playoffs, European Roundup, Sarah Fuller, Klopp, The Undoing, DB Cooper, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, November 30th, 2020? And I know normally we would go right into what we are watching and everything, but obviously this is coming on the heels of the news last week of the death of Diego Maradona. I want to jump right into it. So much has already been said. We don't want to keep repeating ourselves, but he is of the size and importance that he deserves this type of reverence and respect. So we're going to jump right into it. Initial thoughts on the passing of the great one that is and was Diego Maradona.
Very sad news, obviously, and it's really the second occasion in just a few weeks here, and really the third occasion in a short period of time to really reflect on this man's career and life. You had that HBO documentary that came out last year, and then you had his 60th birthday late last month, and now his passing. So there's been recently a lot of reflecting on Maradona, but deservedly so, because he is one of, if not the most iconic figure in the history of the sport. So yeah, absolutely. Lots to talk about there.
It's been amazing to see the reaction and the reaction that transcends the game. So obviously within the game, this was going to hit hard. But I think you saw his ability to touch so many different people in so many different people that you wouldn't even necessarily associate with soccer, coming out and recognizing how important he was, not just to the game, but to the world. Look, when you talk about Diego Maradona, he was equal parts saint and sinner and hero and villain and beauty and beast and God and devil. He was all of these things, but he was first and foremost, and always, from the very first moment that you saw him, a legend. And he demanded our attention, and he deserved it. He was, as so many people have said, and rightly so, an artist. And I guess along with that comes that pathos and that pain and that contradiction that often seems to accompany greatness and great artists. The mere mention of Maradona brings up awe and, as I said, reverence and, let's be honest, debate. But ultimately, when I think about Diego Maradona, as a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s in the American suburbs, he was my first soccer star. He was unlike anything that I had ever seen when he first burst upon my consciousness. And that was in the form of the 1986 World Cup. And you never forget your first. This was somebody that I couldn't be further from, obviously not growing up in a soccer mad culture. And this was this diminutive person that was doing things that I had never seen before. And look, timing is everything. And so he came on my radar at that perfect point. Like I said, I was 16 years old. It was the first World Cup that I really watched. I was at the Pikes Peak Invitational Tournament in, where was it? Colorado Springs, in the lobby of the Holiday Inn Hotel, where they set up a TV, watching that 86 World Cup and watching him dominate. And as I said, doing things that I had never seen before. And, I couldn't necessarily relate in that I didn't see myself in anything that he was doing. He was playing almost a different game. But it was seared into my consciousness, and it never left. And I think when you see all of the different tributes that are coming out, I don't think that anybody is mythologizing or washing over all the contradiction and all of the negative that does come when you're talking about him. But in a certain way, Mosse, and I'll be interested to get your take, especially because of your connection to Brazil. We talk about Messi and Ronaldo right now in this era. And we often talk about Maradona and Pele, even though they weren't necessarily of the same era. We still kind of put them together in this compare and contrast, and they couldn't be any more different in terms of the people that they are. And yet that obvious and very public flawed type of character, because he's human, and we are all flawed, but because he's human, it was there for all of us to see. And because of the platform that he was given and the spotlight that he was given, it was for all of us to see, even though we are all flawed. I think that endeared him to a lot of people around the world, and not just the Argentine, fan base and community and culture. He was oftentimes this lovable rogue. And I've been asked over the last couple of days, why don't you talk about this, that's problematic in terms of things that he said against, I don't know, the United States, or children out of wedlock, or the drugs, or the drinking, or the way that he lived his life. And, that's all part of the story. And that I do think people have been fair and included that in these tributes, but it's also part of the romantic notion of who he is. Now, if you're looking for someone to follow in the footsteps of, if you're looking for someone to emulate and ultimately respect for the person that he was, there's plenty of others, and rightfully so. You should look at others, but that in no way takes away the sheer truth and the impact that he made on not just the soccer community, but the world in general.
Well, as you mentioned, as a Brazilian, I have an interesting perspective on Maradona. And yeah, on the whole Pele thing, I was actually talking to our boss, Zach Kenworthy, about this recently. It's true. There is something more polished about Pele, while Maradona's career and life was more chaotic, and in a way that makes him more captivating. The analogy I made, which I know you're not a rap fan, so this might go over your head, but hopefully our younger listeners will appreciate, is that Pele is like Jay-Z and Maradona was Tupac. And it's a bit of an inconvenient fact for us Brazilians that while Brazil has probably produced the most legendary players in terms of volume in the history of the game, when you get to the very top, Argentina does have us beat. You could make a very plausible case that 3 of the top 5 greatest players in the history of the sport were born in Argentina, which is Messi, Maradona, and Di Stefano. And they have 2 in Messi and Maradona who many people consider the greatest of all time. So it is interesting that at the very, very top of that list now, I think Argentina is more represented than Brazil. But and staying on this Argentina-Brazil tip, my Maradona clicks in for me in 1990. And he caused me my first great heartache as a fan, which was that incredible slalom run he went on to set up Canija for the goal that knocked Brazil out of the 1990 World Cup in the round of 16. And that, to me, is the underrated play in all this. I see a lot of debate about the England goal versus the Belgium goal, but don't sleep on that run against Brazil in 1990, because the context here matters. If you watch clips from Maradona in 86, he was at the absolute peak of his powers. And that whole World Cup, he was going on these incredible slalom runs, beating 2-3 defenders. So the fact that he scored the goals that he did against England and Belgium was sort of in keeping with how he was playing that whole tournament. The 1990 play was a bit out of context because he was having some fitness issues in that World Cup. He was a bit past his peak. He wasn't having a great tournament. There was even talk about him getting dropped for that Brazil game. And Brazil completely dominated that match. Maradona's even admitted that on the balance of play, Brazil should have won that game like 6-0. And then out of nowhere, having not touched the ball for most of the game, late in the second half, he pulls a rabbit out of his hat, embarks on this incredible run where he beats 3 or 4 Brazilian defenders and then a perfect pass to Canija. So that was just a guy who's an absolute genius. And when his country most needed it, he, like I said, he just pulled a rabbit out of his hat. So that play to me is every bit as iconic as those 2 famous goals he scored in 86. So that's when Maradona sort of clicks in for me.
Well, to your point, Pele shouldn't be hurt because he, at least on the surface and from a public perspective, was an angel relative to Maradona in this back and forth in this comparison. But you're absolutely right. That is going to happen. I was, when they announced that they were going to have 3 days of mourning in Argentina, the first thing that a lot of people were thinking, including myself, was, well, what happens when, and I'm not going on wood here, hopefully it's a long time from now, Pele passes away. do you have to have 4? And is this back and forth type of competition that's going to happen? Should it be? No, but we know how humans work and how these things these things going on. You mentioned the England game, which was a lot of the talk over the last few days. The England against Argentina, where it can be argued the best and worst of Maradona was on display. And even within that, you can even look at what you're calling the worst as maybe the best, or the purest definition of what he was in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net with his hand and then scoring one of the great goals in history, and arguably the greatest goal in World Cup history against England. And so immediately they start, especially over in England, Peter Shilton was on air again talking about how he still doesn't respect Maradona because he looks at him as a cheater. And, in the moment of this man's death, I thought that the criticism of Shilton for this posture and this stance was not necessarily fair. I can completely respect and understand why he maintains this and feels this way, and has for many, many years, and had requested and never got that apology for what he views as doing something not only against the law, but against the spirit of the game, and ultimately being rewarded for it. That it happened at his death, I understand why people kind of frown and cringe at that. But this is how he's felt. I think he's going to go to his death thinking that, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of what this game is, and that also shows you how impactful that World Cup is. Because look, we're talking about a guy in Maradona who lived in a bubble. He came from nothing, but once he came out of nothing, he lived in a bubble for the rest of his life. He was given opportunities that 99.999% of the people on earth would never be given. But also, once he stopped actually kicking the ball and just became Maradona, I think he was able to transition and adjust and be, if you will, much easier and be much more comfortable without kicking the ball. I think Pele was able to transition much better than Diego Maradona. We've seen it time and time again with athletes when that career is over, how difficult it is for them to live a life where they're not kicking a ball, especially huge stars. And he seemed like he was constantly chasing something. And I don't think he ever found it. And certainly I could have told him, anybody could have told them, you're never, ever going to find that replacement for playing, because there is nothing on earth that is the same. There might be other things that you can find, and that's part of the search and the journey, but I don't think he ever got there.
Well, very quickly on the hand of God, it is amusing, given all the issues that they have in England with VAR, which we'll get to later in this podcast, to see these headlines saying, oh, if only we had VAR back in 1986. And I'll say this to my English friends, be careful with that, because if there was goal line technology back in 1966, you would probably have 0 World Cups right now. And by the way, don't bring up the 4th goal as if that eliminates the controversy, because that 4th goal was scored on the counter while Germany had poured forward. So the 3rd goal begets the 4th goal. So, so that's my little ding to my English friends. But, it's funny, you mentioned how much Maradona struggled at times with his level of fame. I did, and we're going to talk about television much later in this podcast, but I did watch the John Belushi documentary that you recommended last week. And if you squint, there are some similarities there. There's a very poignant line by Harold Ramis where he talks about how, at one point in Belushi's career, he was on the #1 comedy show, which was Saturday Night Live. He was on the #1 comedy movie, which was Animal House, and he had the #1 album in the country with the Blues Brothers. And Harold, is it Ramis? Ramis or Ramis? He's sort of reflecting on that. He said at the time he was reflecting on that, he said, boy, that's great for John, but he's never going to survive this because it's just too much fame and adulation for a person to handle. And I thought about that with Maradona too. You watch that HBO documentary and the level of worship that surrounded him and how abnormal his life became there. And it's just hard for any human being to grapple with that. I think in the final analysis, being Diego Maradona was just too much for anybody to possibly handle.
I think that's letting him off the hook a little bit. I think he enjoyed it. Now, how he handled it is debatable. And at times he handled it well, and times he didn't. But I think that bubble that he created by being arguably the greatest player ever to play the game was something that he inhabited. There was ultimately, I think that while it can be constrictive, I think there was a comfort and a safety and a warmth in it. And he operated for the rest of his life in that, whether he was, I mean, this guy coached Argentina in the World Cup, had plenty of opportunities and coaching opportunities. He was 60 years old. My mom texted me when the news broke, and, I think she said, what a surprise. And let's be honest, okay? The way that he lived, the way that he looked, I mean, the things that he did, this was a giant red flashing light for many, many years that this was problematic and this was not sustainable from a human perspective to be able to continue to do this. So while it was incredibly painful and sad, I don't think that it was surprising to a lot of people that have followed what he has done and who he is. Still way too early. And like I said, I just think he just never found a way to adjust to life. I do think he found a way to adjust to being Maradona, but I don't think that he found a way to adjust to being Maradona in life after soccer. And, he was constant, like I said, he was constantly searching. I've told you, I think before, the story about meeting him, because everybody was calling and asking, and you have stories, can you do this? And I talked to media in England and all over different places that wanted to talk about this when something like this happens. The only time that I met him, and I know I've told this story before, was in 1995. We were down in Uruguay for Copa America, the U.S. team, and we played Argentina. And before the first whistle, by the way, we beat Argentina. We ended up beating Argentina 3-0. It was a historic type of day and moment for the U.S. team. But before the first whistle even blew, you knew he was in the building. There was this aura. We hadn't seen him. It just filtered out that he is in the building. That was his stature, and that was how powerful just the mere whisper of him would be. We were able to meet him after the game. And I've said before, what people sometimes forget is how small he was. If you didn't know anything about soccer and saw him walking down the street, you wouldn't look and say, there goes one of the greatest players ever to play the game. And yet when he came through this mass of people, you didn't actually see him. It was the proverbial parting of the seas. And you knew you were in the presence of greatness as the people moved aside for this God to walk through whatever mass or area he was making his way through. And, you've seen the pictures now of the thousands of people in the streets and the people crying and the eulogies and the tributes and the tributes to him. He touched people, and he changed the way that we think about the game. And, I think we should leave this with a quote from him. How about that, Mosse? Or you have anything else you want to add before I leave you with a quote?
I did have a couple of things, but if you want to call it,
go ahead. No, go ahead. I got a quote here that we're gonna read here, and I want to end it with that.
Another tremendous contribution by Jeff Hernandez.
Yes.
I was listening to a podcast on L'Equipe, and seeing the outpouring of love in Argentina, the reaction, they were positing the theory, the notion that Argentina is the single most passionate soccer nation in the world, which is quite the statement, because we do go around the world and how beloved the sport is in places everywhere from England to Brazil to wherever else. But that Argentina stands alone above the rest, that there's just an extra layer of it there. I mean, do you buy that? Do you think a case could be made that Argentina is the single most passionate soccer nation on the planet?
Come on, that's like judging somebody's love. When you're judging somebody's passion, I mean, what are you judging it on? The amount of tears they cry, the volume of the way they scream, the reaction that they have to a goal. It's all Mosse. I mean, it's like judging somebody because they don't cry enough. And we all have different reactions, and I don't think that that's a fair judgment. Is it a passionate culture? And is it more passionate, I guess, than others? Yeah, I guess you can make that argument, but I can no more tell you that Argentina is a more passionate soccer culture than somebody else than tell you that they have better looking people, or they have better wine, or they have better food. I know they got great wine, but it's all subjective, and it's all personal opinion. And the way that an Argentine acts, and that what we're associating with passion, might not work for another culture, but it doesn't mean that person or that culture isn't equally as invested or passionate about the game. So, but I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. We there's the colors and the pageantry and the crowds, all that. It's wonderful to see, and it is exciting, and it is oftentimes put up on a pedestal to show how important it is.
And then one more thing, I read a lot of articles about this the last few days, about how Maradona's sort of Napoli rags to riches story would no longer be possible in today's game, how a player of that level would ever end up at such an unfashionable club. Now, he did go to Barcelona first and spent 2 seasons there, and it didn't quite work out. And it's interesting that Barcelona is the only club he played for that doesn't really have all that positive an association with him. But then he goes to Napoli, which was nothing more than a mid-table Serie A team with no history whatsoever. And it's interesting, too, that the summer before, in 1983, Zico had gone to Udinese under similar circumstances. So there was a period there, circa 84, 85, where you had arguably the 2 best players in the world, certainly 2 of the top 3, along with Platini, playing for mid-table, unfashionable Serie A clubs. And Zico didn't last that long at Udinese, but Maradona stuck around at Napoli and was able to elevate them to being a great power that started winning major trophies and Serie A titles. And I've read a lot of articles in the last few days about how that's no longer possible, that there's no way, with how top heavy the sport has become, that a player of that level would ever end up at a club like that he's going straight to the super clubs. And so, it just became another occasion for people to sort of lament the top heaviness of the game today, and the fact that a story like that, Maradona's at Napoli, is no longer possible.
Yeah, and we saw the scenes, not just in Napoli, but every team and different players and leagues honor him with jerseys and the number. And we saw Messi score a goal and take his shirt off and do all that. So he was, as I said, far from perfect, but the impact is undeniable, and that legendary status is undeniable, and he will never be forgotten. I'll leave you with a quote from Diego Maradona, and thanks to Jefe, Jeff Hernandez, for sending this through to us here on our chat. "If I die, I want to be reborn, and I want to be a footballer," Diego Maradona said. He said, "And I want to be Diego Armando Maradona again. I'm a player who has given joy to people, and that's more than enough for me." And I think it shows that while at times difficult and challenging the life that he lived, and a lot of times of his own making, he still enjoyed what he did and continued to do, and that joy that he brought to people. And he brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. All right, Mosse, we are going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we will be doing our MLS Playoffs roundup. MLS Playoffs are cruising along, so don't go away. Real quick break. All right, welcome back. Time for some MLS playoff action. MLS playoffs continue on. The craziness and the chaos of MLS playoffs is something that I love, I expect, and MLS playoffs are the gift that keep giving. All right, Mosse, where do you want to start? You want to start over there with New England and Orlando? Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
All right, so we know that you can get hot at the right time, and you can go on a run, and you can have had a middling and mediocre type of season, squeak into the playoffs, and just get hot, either because it just happens and the soccer gods smile at you, or in a situation like New England, where you just haven't had all of your big guns going in terms of your designated players, it all starts to click. And it has for New England. They go down to Orlando, and they come away with a well-earned, well-deserved 3-1 victory over Orlando. Now, look, congratulations to Oscar Pereira and Orlando. This is absolutely a successful year. He deserves the credit and the praise, as do his players, in terms of what they have done. But this is certainly not the way that they envisioned this, playing at home and going out to a team like New England. And yet, bye-bye, and New England continues on. Continued big play from the designated players when it comes to New England, with Buxa and Heel and who's the other one? Who did I forget? Who am I forgetting?
Gustavo Bo.
Yes, Gustavo Bo. And Matt Turner in goal. So you got a lot of things happening right. Again, Bruce Arena, who even before this would go down as arguably the greatest American soccer coach in history, continues to add to his legacy. He has turned it around, certainly in terms of the perception of this team right now, and he's got him sitting a game away from possibly going to an MLS Cup, and that in and of itself is amazing when we talk about New England. So congratulations to Bruce Arena. A bunch of things happened in this game, including a red card, straight red, not even a question, red, blood red, whatever you want to call it, dumb, which put Orlando down a player. And, we talked about the importance of big time players and designated players. Nani missed a penalty, and, it could have changed the game. It would have made it 2-2. He misses it and isn't able to convert it. And, he probably shouldn't even been on the field. If his name wasn't Nani, there's a good chance, given the way that he acted and his physical and vocal reaction to the referee, that he would have been gone. And, that's okay. Different players get treated differently based on stature and status and name and all that. I get that. That happens everywhere in the world, but not a great ending for Nani in the most important game of the season. And so Orlando go home. Mosse, thoughts on this game?
Well, in talking about New England, I want to include the Philadelphia game too, because I think it's pertinent. In a quote unquote normal MLS regular season in which everybody played 34 games, 17 home, 17 away in front of fans every week for 7-8 months without any abnormal gaps. And yes, it's an unbalanced schedule, but not as unbalanced as we saw this season. The regular season does give you a general sense of who the best teams are, so that if an 8 seed defeats a 1 seed, you have no problem calling it an upset. And we all talk about the unpredictability of the MLS playoffs and how anybody can get hot, and even a great team can have a bad day where the ball doesn't bounce your way. And we've seen that many times over the years. That Philadelphia-New England game did not feel like that. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. That felt like this was just a wonky regular season where we didn't come out of it with as much of a sense of who the best teams really are. And you mentioned the Carlos Gil thing, the fact that New England didn't have him all season. I think based on the evidence from these past 2-3 games, I now feel like had they had them the whole season, they would have been one of the best teams up there. So that did not feel like a big upset to me at all. It felt like you could make a very good case that with all their guys, New England are better than Philadelphia. And so, yeah, this whole New England run doesn't feel that Cinderella underdogish to me, because what I'm watching with all their DPs is a team that looks like one of the best teams of the league. It just took until now for them to have all their pieces and to be able to show it. So that's kind of my overview take on New England and what they're doing. And the Bruce Arena story is fascinating to me, because it reminds me a little bit, not to keep bringing up Brazil, but it reminds me a little bit of Scolari, in that Bruce Arena, all this club success, and then a great international moment, which, by the way, it occurred in the same World Cup for those two, Arena leading the U.S. to the quarterfinals in 2002 and Scolari winning it with Brazil. And you felt like their legacies were secure. And they decide to go back to the national team for a second spell late in their career, and something disastrous happens. In Scolari's case, the 7-1. In Arena's case, the loss to Trinidad and failing to qualify. And you think, oh, wow, now this is going to damage their legacy irreparably. But then they come back, and Scolari took over Palmeiras and won a Brazilian league title, and there was some measure of rehabilitation there. And now Arena's having it with New England. And I think in the last couple of days, people really took a step back and said, okay, I know what happened with the U.S. team in Trinidad, but let's credit where credit's due with what this man has done. I mean, he's had a truly amazing career, and leading New England to MLS Cup this season would really be the icing on the cake.
Yeah, it's great for him. I will say this, and to your point, look, even in normal times, MLS is based on manufactured parity. And so favorites or underdogs, all that kind of stuff. Yes, there are times where there's an unexpected type of result, but we shouldn't be surprised at anything that happens in Major League Soccer. I still maintain it's the most difficult league to predict. And if you find the person that can do it on a consistent basis, good for you. And ride that person, take, bet whatever they are doing, because they have found a key that few people possess. I was going back and forth between on Twitter with the New England Revolution Twitter handle. I don't know who runs it, but because Brad Feldman, their play-by-play for television and their broadcast, and works for the New England Revolution, had said that nobody expected this to happen. Everybody said that this wasn't going to happen. And, they said that we couldn't do this because everybody wants to be the underdog. It's the most comfortable type of position. You'll see coaches that will create situations to position themselves and portray themselves as the underdog, because it alleviates pressure, because theoretically you have nothing to lose and you can only go up. But it also kind of drives me a little bit crazy. We talk about greats, okay? Part of what makes them great is their ability to do things consistently and to be great consistently and not just be an anomaly. And part of it is that when everybody recognizes and sees that you are good and or great, that you are able to live up to that. And I love a good underdog story. It's all fine and well, but but the real greatness are the ones that when everybody's telling you that you're good or great, that you're able to do that. And nobody wants to inhabit that. Nobody wants to be that type of team. And so, to your point, New England is playing that little engine that could. New England is playing that up. And it might be very, very smart for them to do that. But to your point, this should not come as a surprise. And that New England has done this now is a combination of good players, a good coach, and the parity that exists when it comes to Major League Soccer, and maybe even more so in 2020, to your point, when it comes to the playoffs here, because it's been such a weird season where really assessing what these teams are has been very, very difficult because of the inequities and the inconsistencies that we have seen in terms of who you play and where you play and all that kind of stuff that's gone on. The Columbus-Nashville game also happened. Columbus ultimately scoring their goals and getting their win in extra time. Again, with Nashville as an expansion team, this has to be viewed an unqualified success story for what they did, especially when we saw them. Keep in mind, this is one of the last game of the year that we actually did in a normal setting with 60,000 people. One of the last games was in Nashville, and that was going to be their coming out party. Obviously, things went very south, and they didn't participate in the MLS's back tournament. But for them to go this far and to do what they did, credit to all the leadership on and off the field when it comes to Nashville. And they're going to get a second bite at the apple in terms of reintroducing themselves to the world, and more importantly, to their community, to Nashville next season. Hopefully, knock on wood, we move on, and they will be introducing themselves with already this kind of warm up under their belt, and a very positive one to trumpet. So congratulations to them. But Columbus ultimately, I think they're just a better team, and ultimately it took them a while, but eventually they were able to show that. Anything on that game, Mosse?
Well, I saw you duking it out on Twitter with people about Gyasi Zardes.
Yes, the Gyasi Zardes. It's evergreen.
Discuss that here. I mean, why is it that a portion of the U.S. fan base just has such a bug up their asses about this guy?
Mosse, look, I'm not exasperated by it. It is very much so an evergreen type of situation that we have here. Okay, so when it comes to Gyasi Zardes, this is a player who has at different times starred in Major League Soccer for the teams that he has played with. He started with the Los Angeles Galaxy, and now he's been for many years with the Columbus Crew. To different levels and even in different positions. But ultimately, the consternation that the American soccer community feels when it comes to a Gyasi Zardes is based on what we talk about on this pod often. And that is Gyasi Zardes. And I'm just using him as an example. There are others, but Gyasi Zardes is the manifestation of all of those fears and all of those insecurities and all of that inferiority complex that we, and I will include myself at times, we have in this American soccer community that sees in a potential U.S. men's national team scenario in the future that possibly features, and this blows people's mind, that could possibly feature a starting MLS striker with, in this case, when it comes to Gyasi Zardes, no history and or European pedigree to speak of. And we have seen him develop from a very young player. And so we've seen him at times in that most raw and uncultured and, to a lot of people, limited type of capacity. And that's how a lot of people still feel about him. And, you know, the joke about his first touch. By the way, go watch the game last night again. Go see some of the touches that he had. All right. So this is a player that sometimes we have an image of, and we base it on who he was 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And he's a very, very different player. He has improved as a player. Is he the best player the U.S. has ever produced? No. But that's a lot of the, like I said, the irritation, the consternation, and the anger when it comes to Gyasi Zardes is oftentimes based on where he plays, and that he plays in MLS, and that he potentially could be starting for the U.S. men's national team in any capacity. It irritates people. And so, but look, I've said before, it doesn't matter where you play. It really doesn't. You get on that field, you blow a whistle. I went on a World Cup field and I never even played club soccer, been on the books at a professional club environment. And I went on the field and I figured it out. By the way, I wasn't the only one. Kobe Jones, you can go down the list. When Frankie Haydick or Eddie Pope or Brian McBride, or Landon Donovan, or, the list goes on and on. When these players who are MLS players go on the international level and have success, okay, it's because they're kicking the ball. Now you hedge your bets, and it doesn't mean that a player playing for Juventus isn't going to help you. That's great, but we talk about it all the time. And in particular in this moment, because we just don't have a lot of players up top right now. We have some players that are emerging, and maybe they are going to be even better than Gyasi Zardes. Fine, fair enough. That's great. But it will be because they are just better, regardless of where they play. They might be playing in MLS. They might be playing in second division in France. It doesn't necessarily equate to where you're playing and the quote unquote level in terms of that perception that we have of people. Anyway, Mosse, so that's where that back and forth came. And I love it because it highlights everything that I'm not going to say it's wrong, because it's human. And I have fallen prey to it, and I raise my hand. I get it. I get it. Anyway, Mosse, that's where that came from. What else, Mosse?
And with Columbus facing New England in the conference finals, it does guarantee we'll have an MLS original and MLS Cup for the first time since 2015. Credit where credit's due. That's a John Strong note. We've been messaging each other back and forth the last couple of days with stats, and he sent me that one very excitedly this morning. So
an original means a team that was part of the teams in 1996.
Correct.
So Chicago Fire could never be an MLS original then, right? Because they didn't show up until 1998.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Just want to make sure that we know. That's amazing. So it's been 5 years since we've had an MLS original.
Yep. It's been a lot of Seattle Torontos. There was a Atlanta Portland in there. So
okay. All right. So we have games coming up here that we will be doing actually on Fox. We have Sporting KC and Minnesota. And we have Dallas and Seattle. Actually, Seattle hosting Dallas. I have both home teams winning. So I have SKC winning, and I have Dallas winning. What about you, Mosse? What do you think?
I'm going with Seattle and Minnesota. I'm very into this Loons attack with this Reynoso is an assist machine. Kevin Molino scoring goals. Robin Lod chipping in as well. So I mean, I'm buying the Loons. I love what I've seen from them. They're back-to-back 3-0 wins. One to end the regular season and then that playoff game against Colorado. And so I think they're flying, and SKC looked vulnerable to me in that San Jose match, obviously escaped because of Tim Millia's heroics in the shootout. So I am picking the Loons to win with that one and then Seattle to win the other game.
Well, if that happens, it's going to be on Big Fox. Okay. So because of the situation, the ever-changing situation in sports and with the NFL moving in different things, by the time that you hear this, it will have been announced that, wait a second. Did I say, I want to make sure I picked the right teams. Hold on a second. Did I pick the right? So SKC is hosting Minnesota.
And then Seattle's hosting Dallas. So you said I'm going with both home teams, but then I think you accidentally said Dallas. You meant to say Seattle.
I'm sorry. Okay, Dallas. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going with both home teams. That was right. I think I just messed up the thing. So for the record, so when you yell at me, just at least be correct when you yell at me. I am picking Minnesota and Seattle to win. And they are both the home teams in terms of these.
And in Seattle's case, they obviously have an incredible front three of their own, and Lodero and Rui Diaz and Jordan Morris. All three were MLS Best 11 selections. And you talk about how everybody's trying to cultivate this underdog image. Seattle is the one that obviously can't go there. So they have to embrace the fact that they are the favorites. If they get to MLS Cup, it'd be the fourth in 5 years for them. And if they win it, it'd be third title in 5 years. So already a lot of conversation about, would this constitute a dynasty for the Sounders? Do you have a thought on that?
I think for a dynasty, you have to win 3. Okay. You don't necessarily have to win 3 in a row, but you have to win 3 in 4 years. And so I don't think, let me see if I'm looking correctly. I don't think the only team that has done that recently is the Los Angeles Galaxy between 2011 and 2014. They won 3 out of 4. Seattle, as you mentioned, they were in and won 2016. They were in and lost 2017, but they missed 2018. So what they would have to do then.
So the fact that their 3 would come in a 5-year span doesn't quite meet the criteria for you.
No, actually, they have to start over. So even if they were to win this year, it would only have done 2 in a row. What are you laughing about? Listen, these are my rules, all right? I get to define dynasty, and that's what I do. You have to win 3, and it can either be 3 in a row or 3 out of 4 years. That's it. I have spoken. So no, Seattle is not a dynasty. But they could be. They could, and they would have to obviously win this year to even have a chance here in the next couple years. Mosse, if you're, by the way, your Loons pick, I just want to mention real quick because there has been a change here. This game is going to happen on Thursday on Big Fox. We're going to have a half an hour pregame. So if your Loons are going to upset, I don't know if it's upset, but if the Loons do upset Sporting KC in Kansas City, it will be done on Big Fox. If you're, like I said, you're hearing this will have been announced over the course of while we were recording this. So that'll be fun to see. All right. Anything else on MLS playoffs, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. We're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, oh yes, a European roundup. Nothing like a roundup. All right. Don't go away. All right. We're back with our European roundup. All sorts of stuff happening on and off the field, by the way, when it comes to content generation, shall we say. Where do you want to start? You want to start in England?
Sure.
All right. So what jumped out at you? We're not going to get too into the weeds here, but there are some stories out there. Shall we start with? Let's start with Manchester United. Okay. How about that?
Okay.
Well, you don't want to start with that. You have something else you want to start with? What's the biggest story to you? What was the biggest story?
Based on your text messages the last couple of days, it felt to me like you were very hot on this Liverpool story. But we can go United first and then build up.
No. Listen, Mosse, you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. I am scatterbrained at times, so I'm all over the place. So I part of what I love about you is you redirect me in the right place.
You remember the days when Jurgen Klopp was this happy-go-lucky guy, smiling through every interview. Every answer was punctuated with that infectious laugh.
Laugh and the smile.
What happened to that guy? I miss that guy.
Exactly, right? Does anybody remember laughter? Does anybody remember Klopp?
When did Jurgen Klopp turn into Jose Mourinho? I mean,
wow, what a
cranky?
grouch. All right, so for the people that don't know or maybe haven't heard, explain what happened.
Well, so Liverpool were held to a 1-1 draw by Brighton this past weekend. There was some VAR stuff in this game. They had Mo Salah had a goal ruled out for one of those millimetric offsides, and then Brighton got their equalizer, a very late penalty in which initially not given, but upon a VAR review, Andy Robertson was called for a penalty, and that's how they equalized. And so it ended 1-1. But it's interesting that the fan base was annoyed about VAR, and their anger was directed that way. And so there was the usual VAR conversation that seems to go on every week now in England. But Klopp was more annoyed about something else. He had a post-match interview with a BT reporter, and when the BT reporter raised the fact that James Milner had picked up a hamstring injury in this game, Klopp turned to him and said, "Congratulations," meaning it's this crazy schedule that we've been subjected to because the TV networks love to put Liverpool in prime time spots. And so we have to play, we played a Wednesday Champions League game. We have to turn around and play an early Saturday Premier League game. And so you're the cause of all these injuries we're having. And the BT reporter shot back. What are you talking about? It's the league that makes up the schedules and yada, yada. And so it was this lengthy back and forth that got a lot of play in the last couple of days. What did you make of it?
Jurgen Klopp can be wrong and still be awesome. And so he is wrong in this case, and he still remains awesome. I love Jurgen Klopp. This was not a good look for him or for his team. He was shooting the messenger, and I think his ire and his anger and his frustration was certainly misdirected. And here's the deal. Look, I get it. Okay, you can feel aggrieved and angry and irritated about things, and it's relative to the world in which you inhabit, right? And we all know that relative to a lot of other things, our irritations mean nothing. But I think more so than maybe any time in the past, in 2020, you got to read the room. You got to know what's going on in the world. And look, it doesn't mean you don't do things to what you feel is help protect the players and everything. But this made him, Jurgen Klopp, look out of touch and have a lack of awareness and self-awareness in terms of what is going on in the world. To be screaming and yelling about players playing a sport for millions and millions and millions of dollars, okay? And where do those millions and millions and millions of dollars come from? They come from the broadcast contracts out there, okay, that the league agrees to. So you know why, Jurgen Klopp, you are able to live a charmed life and be paid millions and millions of dollars? Do you know why that you are able to live a charmed life as the coach of Liverpool and be given the level and the expense of the talent that you have at your disposal? Do you know why that you are able to live in this bubble that is the EPL and greater bubble that is working in the professional game? It's because of the broadcast contracts and the fees that are paid. And yes, any business is going to try to maximize their return on the investment, and a heavy investment that they put in. And in 2020, by the way, they have struggled to be able to do that. And so they're going to try to find every possible way to do that. You know who doesn't care that you're playing a lot of games? You know who doesn't care that somebody had a hamstring injury? The people that have lost their jobs, the people that have been furloughed, the people that can't make ends meet, the people that are struggling through 2020. And as I said, I know that Jurgen Klopp's job is to win and to protect his players. And in a sense, that is what he's doing. And the problem, and you mentioned it, and this is where I'll end, and I'll throw it back to you, is because of the image that Jurgen Klopp has cultivated of this carefree, jovial type of gregarious person and personality, this runs counter to that. And so it's that much more jarring, and we don't like it. Now, does the message get lost? Maybe because of who he is. Or maybe the message is heard and people say, yeah, but I don't care. All right. Suck it up. Figure it out. Okay. Everybody else has to go through it. All right. And if you do have a problem, take it up with the people that run the league. And when you do and things are changed, recognize that you may be impacted individually. Your players might be impacted individually when it comes to the pay and the talent and the potential to upgrade and the things that you want to do going forward. So, this is the price to pay. Am I being too critical, or am I missing a piece of this equation, Mosse?
No, I mean, the only thing I'll say is it's a tad disingenuous for that reporter to act like networks don't have a major say over when games are played. We work for
why shouldn't they?
Television network. I mean, I guess that would be the other argument, but that the reporter was trying to portray to Klopp, hey, it's not our fault at all. The league that makes all these decisions, so you should be complaining to them. But the networks do have some influence on when games are played. And by the way, we see that.
But Mosse, but wait a second. Of course, if you as the seller, which is what Jurgen Klopp and the EPL is, okay, I know Jurgen Klopp doesn't own a piece of it, but what the EPL is, they are the seller. At any point, they can say, nope, don't want to do this. The deal is off, okay? I'm the buyer. I'm the broadcaster. I'm the buyer. I'm giving you money. If you don't want to do the deal because you don't like whatever is stipulated in the deal, then either change the deal or walk away. I mean, I don't think that the reporter was saying that the TV the TV broadcast partners don't have a say. They get as much as they possibly can, like in any negotiation, in any deal. I mean, because you want to maximize all of the return that you're going to get. You spend all of this money, and you got to find a way to sell that content to not only make back the money, but hopefully make a profit. That's what you're doing. And you're going to do everything in your power to give yourself the best possible chance of recouping that money and then that profit of the money that you put out there. I thought that the reporter, I can't remember his name, I apologize, but I thought that in that moment, and I know, look, everybody has biases and baggage and history, and we bring it because we're humans. And I know the reporters at times are trained not to do that. But I thought that what he did was wonderful because it furthered the conversation. All right. It in a way, it said what many people were thinking in that moment. And I know some people don't like that. And I don't want it to necessarily be a back and forth and a debate show on a post-game interview. But I liked it. I don't know. I thought it was good TV.
Last thing on this, and then we'll jump to the VAR stuff. Liverpool have become a little bit victims of their success, and it's something we see in this country with the NFL. If you're one of the glamour teams that people want to watch, invariably you're going to be put a lot in prime time slots, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, and that's going to disrupt your schedule a little bit. And that's what Liverpool are dealing with now. They are right now the glamour team in the Premier League. So to your point, networks, they want to be able to show Liverpool at whatever their biggest ratings slots are. And so that doesn't always fit in nicely for their schedule. It's not always conducive to Liverpool having the appropriate rest in between games that Klopp thinks they should have. But that is, I suppose, the price of success. But I will say, where earlier in the interview, I do side with Klopp, is the reporter asked him about the VAR decisions. Klopp said they were all correct. And then the reporter kept at it a little bit. And then Klopp said, look, you're trying to use me to create a controversy. And Klopp was right there because he had answered the question. He had said, no issue with the calls. They're all correct. And then the reporter still went back with another question about it. So, and kudos to Klopp for saying that. And by the way, I thought that was a penalty on Robertson at the end. So I don't think Liverpool fans have anything to complain about there. I actually thought that was the correct decision.
All right. Well, we'll see if Klopp's attitude changes. And once again, deflecting from a year that we know hasn't been great for Liverpool. I mean, how are you going to live up to the past? But good coaches, and we've seen it time and time again. I mean, you can just look at Mourinho at times where we're left talking. Right now, we were talking about Liverpool relative to the coach. and to his comments that have nothing necessarily to do with what happened on the field. And that in and of itself may be part of the strategy of what Klopp is doing. And in that sense, maybe he will have the last laugh, because he will have deflected from what he maybe recognizes as a season that is going to be unlike any other, and going to pose a lot of obstacles and difficulties in terms of living up to what he has done in the past. What else, Mosse?
Well, on paper, the big game of the weekend in England was supposed to be Chelsea-Tottenham, Lampard against Mourinho, the student against the teacher. And based on your text messages, again, it doesn't sound like you were all that captivated by this match.
Well, I was talking to Alex Dowd before we came on air, and he was in this weird place that Chelsea folks now find themselves in, where they have been Mourinho'd. And, a feeling that when it was for them, they bathed in and celebrated. And yet when it happens to them, now they kind of understand and feel the pain and the slow drilling of a back molar that happens when this man gets involved in a game. Yeah, it was not anything that they're going to put in a time capsule, as they said. So I was not captivated. Ultimately, I watched it, but it wasn't.
I will say, I don't think Frank Lampard was entirely displeased by the result either, because he was hit over the head so much early on in the season about how defense was going to be the big problem for Chelsea. And so he doesn't mind a clean sheet against the quality opponent. He'll take some satisfaction out of that. I think he feels like with the talent he has up there, the goals are going to come. And the most important thing right now is to build a foundation of not conceding goals. So I don't think either manager walked away that displeased. Mourinho obviously is very happy, and he got what he wanted, and Tottenham are still top of the league. So
and we saw an appearance from a bearded Christian Pulisic. So that was good.
Which I'm sorry, but his face lacks the gravitas to pull it off.
You don't think he can pull it off, is what you're saying?
Reminds me of our boss, Zach Kenworthy, who's trying to grow a beard right now and encountering the same issue. I mean, certain people they have that sort of boyish look to them that you slap a beard on there and it just doesn't look right. I thought he looked ridiculous, actually, to be honest.
I hear you. Hey, look, as long as he didn't get hurt, which he didn't, and I'm not going to I'll take that. He can have a goatee for all I care, as long as he doesn't get hurt. So he was on there. Anything else EPL wise? I had mentioned Manchester United. You want to hit that one before we go on?
Sure. A great comeback against Southampton. They were down 2-0. They win 3-2. It's really Cavani's first big moment, assist and 2 of the goals, including a stoppage time winner. Bizarre story now where they're going back, and a couple of days ago he had a social media post or minimum. Was it a couple of days ago? Was it after this game? I'm not even sure. In which he said something that might technically fall under the definition of a racial slur, and he might get suspended for it. So keep an eye on that story. But as far as what happened on the field, it was a good moment for him. And now he heads into a game against his former team in the Champions League, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then the only other thing to hit on in the Premier League was Arsenal lost to Wolves. So Arsenal still in crisis. They're all the way down in the bottom half of the table. Scary moment in this game with the collision, David Luiz and Raul Jimenez. Latest reports, it looks like it's going to be okay. Very scary moment, but where he was rushed to a hospital after. What have you seen anything?
Yeah, I mean, the reports say that he fractured his skull, but he's going to be okay. But I mean, that's some scary things. Yeah. Just the actual physical recovery of that. And then, you talk about head injuries and the possible longer lasting type of effects. But I mean, he's obviously awake and alert, and that's a good thing. But I suppose we'll find out as he progresses. But thoughts going out to him. It was horrible to see that. The Manchester United faithful going from the beginning of the game where this has got to be it. This is the final straw for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to Cavani has saved his job, and they go on. I mean, it just must be a tightrope type of balance and existence for Ole, or he's been given such assurances that he doesn't even care anymore because they're just going to ride this thing out. I feel like I ask you all the time, is this the right person to lead this team?
I think so. I like him.
Okay.
So I think they've changed managers so often in recent years that he's done enough that they ought to stick it out with him for a little while.
Wait. So is he good, or you don't think that you should change? I mean, you have to really weigh the fact that you don't want to change because you've changed so much versus is this guy any good? And I feel like you're coming down on the side of, he might be good. We don't really know yet, but we're just so scared of changing that we're just going to keep him on there. That's not a reason to keep a coach or a manager.
No, that's fair. And it's probably a little more that than me having this great confidence in him as a coach. But so, yeah, that's fair.
Wow, Oli, you just got the biggest backhanded compliment I've ever seen. All right, anything else EPL-wise, Mosse?
No, that's it.
All right, so Bundesliga. Let's head over to Germany here. Bayern, they just keep rolling along. Manuel Neuer's got like his 400 and something appearance. I mean, the dude has just been playing for well over a decade, almost a decade and a half now. It just keeps going on. So, the headlines, Bayern is still the best and really, really good and arguably the best in the world. Dortmund can't get it done against Cologne, right? And Schalke are really, really bad, right?
Yeah, Bayern took care of Stuttgart. Leipzig have leaped into second. They beat Arminia Bielefeld. And then Dortmund, with one of those classic Dortmund-esque defeats, they lose to Cologne 2-1. Haaland had a horrible miss at the end of the game that would have at least salvaged the point. The one Dortmund goal did come about, a Gio Reyna assist to Thorgan Hazard, and a move that also involved Moukoko. So it was a 16-year-old to an 18-year-old to Hazard for the goal. So, Moukoko, you can just physically, he looks the part. Now, I don't want to get into what that means about whether he's actually as old as they say he is, but like he does not look like out of his depth physically, and he obviously has the skill. So he gave him a bit of a spark in this game, and it's definitely going to help him this season. I mean, this is one to keep an eye on, but still terrible result for Dortmund. They actually dropped to fourth. It's all bunched up there at the top, but Leverkusen are third, Dortmund are fourth in the Bundesliga.
If you had to say, does Dortmund have any chance at the title this year? I mean, I wouldn't put any money on them.
Yeah, it's hard to see it. I mean, Bayern are just so good. Again, I do think Dortmund are absolutely loaded in the attack. So this was a season where I actually felt like they could keep up with Bayern and at least make things interesting. And I guess I still kind of think that, but just you just know that every now and then they're going to have a result like this that Bayern isn't going to have, losing to Cologne. And so ultimately that's going to be their undoing. So now, Bayern all the way to win the Bundesliga.
Should we jump over to Spain?
Sure.
All right. I mentioned a little earlier that Messi scored as Barcelona won 4-0, a romp. But the moment was him taking off his jersey, and underneath was a Maradona jersey, a number 10 jersey for what was the name of the team that
Newell's Old Boys.
Newell's Old Boys, exactly. And Maradona played for only a few games there, but was definitely impactful. And still, I mean, that shows you the legend. Maradona can just suit up a few games and still be a legend for a club. And so it was really interesting to see the 10, and it was poignant, and it was a wonderful picture and some great photographs of it. And the goal that he ended up scoring mirrors a goal that Maradona scored. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing.
And by the way, Barcelona might get fined for that because the Newell's shirt has a different sponsor in it than the Barcelona one. And per the contract, he's not allowed to flash it during a game, a jersey with any different sponsor.
I don't know who the two competing sponsors are, but I would love to see the conversation in the boardroom of when they go after somebody for doing that. And
I want to say our colleague Johnny Araya is big on this stuff of sponsorship brands. He would know better than me, but I think Newell's is Adidas and Barcelona might be Nike. So that's the dispute there. But remember I mentioned to you a while back that I listened to a podcast about the city of Rosario in Argentina, and that's where Newell's are from. And that was this amazing convergence of Messi and Maradona, because Maradona played there briefly and Messi was growing up there. So Messi actually attended Maradona's first game for Newell's Old Boys. So that club sort of links the two of them. And it's also the club that Bielsa managed, and the stadium is named after Bielsa. So it's a fascinating city with a footballing heritage there. And as far as, Barcelona 4-0 win over Osasuna, Griezmann also scored a fantastic goal in this game. Coutinho got on the score sheet. So Barcelona needed a result like this, kind of a flex the muscles kind of performance to sort of get back on track. They've been struggling a little bit. Meanwhile, Real Madrid lose to Alaves 2-1. So they've been all over the place this season. They had a nice Champions League win away to Inter, and then they follow that up with this. So Real Madrid very up and down this season. And then the team I keep talking about, I really think this is a year where they could very well win La Liga, is Atletico Madrid, who won 1-0 away to Valencia. They're 9 points clear of Barcelona, and they're 6 points clear of Real Madrid, but they've played one fewer game than Real Madrid. So if they win that game in hand, they would also be 9 points above them. So it's early, but still that's that lead. And, you know, I when I look at the standings as far as winning La Liga, I look at Atletico, Barca, and Real, with apologies to Sociedad and Villarreal and teams like that are up there now, but I think will eventually fade. So I like where Atletico Madrid are at right now.
Yeah, but they would, I'm assuming they have 2, maybe even 3 games against Barcelona and Real Madrid, and so those games could be the deciding ones going forward, right? So that's a possible 6 points, possibly 9 point swing then between what they have left, right?
Actually, they have a game against Real Madrid coming up,
okay.
And the big news there is Eden Hazard. I forgot to mention, he picked up an injury in this Real Madrid loss to Alaves, and is now going to be out a few weeks. Could miss the rest of 2020, which, you know, it's just injuries have just dogged him there his whole time at Real Madrid so far. And so now he's going to miss some big games here. And so that's not good news for them, but yep.
All right. So you're going to keep on the athletic train though. You're not going to jump off it yet. All right.
No.
Maybe January comes around and things change. Who knows? All right. Over to Serie A. I mean, Milan keeps on flying. Let's see. So 23 points for Milan, 18 for Inter, and Juventus at 17 points. Juventus is, you know, heavily reliant on Cristiano. What else, Mosse?
So interesting thing here. Last week I said that the story of the Serie A season so far has been about these 3 goal scorers: Zlatan, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Lukaku. Right. And none of the 3 started for their respective teams this weekend. Zlatan didn't play. He had a bit of an injury. Ronaldo was rested for Juve's game. Pirlo claimed afterwards he's been banged up, and so he felt like he needed a game off. And then Lukaku didn't start for Inter. He was available on the bench. And so it was sort of an interesting test case of which club is most reliant on their big goal scorer. And amazingly enough, on the evidence, at least of this weekend, you come out of it feeling like Juve of the 3 is the one that's most dependent on their big goal scorer, because Milan didn't miss a beat. Rebic started up top. They also started these 2 kids I love, Brahim Diaz and Sandro Tonali. Played well. They beat Fiorentina 2-0, no problem. They're still unbeaten this season, top of the table. Inter had a really nice win, 3-0 away to Sassuolo. Alexis Sanchez, who started in place of Lukaku, scored. Lukaku came on very late, but the outcome was already decided, so no problems there. And it's actually Juve, the one that really missed Ronaldo. They held 1-1 by Benevento, and so after the game, all the questions were Pirlo were, why did you rest this guy? We can't afford to drop any points right now, and we clearly need him to beat even the riffraff in Italy. So interesting, at least in this early going, it looks like of those 3 teams, Juve might be the most dependent on their big goal scorer, which is not supposed to be the case. You figure they have the most depth of quality of anybody, but it's not really showing right now.
I mean, you know, the resting of players, I hesitate to scream and yell too much about it, because, you know, I was a defender, and I know that's a different type of exertion relative to midfielders, but I don't understand it. I don't understand. I mean, I understand the theory and the concept of having players rested and giving them games off. I just, from a player's perspective, I would never, ever want to not play. I just can't get that. Now, part of that was based in fear, in that no matter where I was in the pecking order, even if I was at the top of the pecking order, I was always deathly afraid of losing my position. And I never wanted to give anybody a chance to Wally Pitt me, Mosse, whether it's injury or just because I'm being left out to get a rest. I know I sound grumpy old guyish, but it just drives me nuts. And I feel like we've created an acceptance of it, and therefore an excuse. All right, whatever. I'll stop that now, Mosse. Maybe I am just old. All right. So can we, anything Liga you want to talk about?
Well,
What I mean?
Just another bad result for PSG, which will segue into talking about the Champions League. 2-2 draw against Bordeaux. I tell you, it's not going to last. The PSG eventually will pull away, but even Ligue 1 is a bit frisky right now. You look at that table, PSG in first place, but right behind them, you've got Lille, Lyon, Monaco, who are doing well under Niko Kovac. Marseille are 4 points back, but have 2 games in hand. So if they win those games, they would actually even leapfrog PSG into first place. So at least for now, it's even Ligue 1 has a little juice there at the very top. It's all bunched together. So PSG just are not right. They get all their guys back, and still they can't beat Bordeaux. A lot of pressure on Tuchel there, and a lot of questions surrounding the team as they go into what is a massive Champions League game, if you want to segue.
Yeah, okay, let's segue right into Champions League because it is upon us, and there are positions to be secured and or lost by a number of teams, right?
Correct. Yeah. So some of the big games I have my eye on. Borussia Mönchengladbach host Inter, who, as bad as Inter have been, they have only 2 points from 4 games. If they won their last 2, I still think there's a pretty good chance they would qualify. They need to win this game, which would then leave them 3 points behind Gladbach, but with the head-to-head tiebreaker. And then in the last match day, Inter are home to Shakhtar. Gladbach are away to Real Madrid. So it's really not that far-fetched for Inter to go through if they can win this game. This is the tough part here because Gladbach have been pretty good. The other match in that group also interesting. Real Madrid are away to Shakhtar in Ukraine. And then just other games that have my interest. Liverpool, who only need a point to advance. They host Ajax. You've got Atletico Madrid, who have made a bit of a mess of this group and kept Lokomotiv Moscow and Jesse Marsch Salzburg still alive. They host Bayern. But one good thing for Atletico, Bayern have already clinched everything, so they're resting a bunch of guys. Lewandowski hasn't traveled. Neuer hasn't traveled. So maybe Atletico can get a result there and advance. And then the big one to me is Manchester United hosting PSG. Now, keep in mind, Leipzig will have played earlier in the day against Istanbul Başakşehir, and so PSG will take the field knowing what Leipzig did, but still a lot of pressure on PSG in this game. Presuming Leipzig take care of business, PSG absolutely cannot afford to lose to United. Preferably, they need a win, but even a draw, I guess, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because Leipzig and United then face each other in the last match day. So a lot of different permutations there, but yeah, I mean, so PSG, I'm not feeling very confident on that from what I've seen.
So when it comes to PSG and Inter, I think both of us in our predictions, we had them going through. Do you, would you still bet on that? I mean, they obviously need a lot to go right, and they need to, they can't mess up here. But given what we've seen so far,
I'm not confident about either. I'll put it that way.
Okay,
it's possible, but not confident about either. And then very, very last thing, if we're done with Champions League, I don't want to sneak one more thing in here.
Of course, my friend. Of course.
The FIFA Best nominations came out.
What is that, Mosse? What is the FIFA Best nominations? Explain to the people what that is.
Well, that is, there's 2 different big player and coach of the year awards. The Ballon d'Or, which was actually controversially canceled this year, but the FIFA one is still happening. It's called the FIFA Best, and the ceremony is, I believe, December 17th. And so they did the nominees for both men's and women's player of the year, and then both men's and women's coach of the year. By the way, no U.S. Involvement on the women's side because it's been kind of a non-year really for U.S. women's soccer. But shifting over to the men, not too much controversy in terms of the men's nominees. It's 11 names. Lewandowski's the big favorite. He's going to win it. And the usual suspects are there. You have Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar, De Bruyne, Mo Salah, etc. Joshua Kimmich to me would be the one big omission that, I mean, I've said on the spot, I think he's now one of the 5 or 6 best players in the world. And to me, everything he did for Bayern and winning the treble, I think he had to be there. There was some controversy though with the coaches. It's they named 5 nominees. It's boy, I should have looked this up beforehand, but I might get this wrong. It's Hansi Flick, Marcelo Bielsa, Lopetegui, Zidane, and my producers are going to have to help me. Oh, Jurgen Klopp, of course. So Jurgen Klopp, Hansi Flick, Bielsa, Lopetegui, and Zidane. And there are some people complaining about Bielsa. They feel like people are getting caught up a little bit in the romanticism of the story that winning the championship with Leeds is not enough to make you one of the top 5 best managers in the world for this past 12 months or whatever the span is that encapsulates this award. And there's, by the way, the usual chirping in South America about the Euro bias of these awards. Reading a lot of articles in Brazil about how on earth did Jorge Jesus not get nominated? He won the Libertadores with Flamengo and took Liverpool to extra time in the Club World Cup final. And surely what he did is more impressive than Lopetegui winning the Europa League with Sevilla or Bielsa winning the championship with Leeds. So there's all that controversy too. So I don't know. Do you have an overall thought on?
Well, I guess
also on whether there's a sort of Euro bias that bothers you about these awards.
Well, they're European awards, right? Aren't they?
Well, it's FIFA. I mean,
it's FIFA. Okay. Well, we know FIFA's Eurocentric anyway. I mean, look, no, it doesn't. Does it bother me? No, I don't lose sleep over it. The Bielsa thing is interesting because I would probably have to look and see when the last time, or if there was ever a situation where a coach brought a team up and then was nominated. I mean, right now, let's see here. Let's look this up. Leeds is sitting in 12th, which would be not just comfortable, but would be, I correct me if I'm wrong, I think considered a great achievement for somebody coming into the Premier League in the form of a Bielsa-led Leeds right now. So yes, we have romanticized him. He shouldn't be nominated simply because he has done this. I mean, it is an accomplishment, or simply because he sits on a bucket. I mean, I get that. I understand why people are maybe miffed at that. But I will say this, and I've said this before on the podcast, I do think that this is an award for coaching and managing. And ultimately, at its core, the essence of the job, the way I see it, is that you are able to take a group and to make it better. And if I were to put a different coach and or manager with that same group, all right, that they couldn't make it as good as you could. And that sometimes gets lost in the modern day coaching world. So I guess what we'd have to see is, if there was another coach that was in charge of Leeds, would they have promoted this team last year and or be sitting in 12th place? I don't know. I mean,
and Andre Villas-Boas, Marseille coach, he had a big issue with Bielsa getting it over Tuchel and said, "Oh, how could you not? Thomas Tuchel, you won all the trophies in France and got PSG to the Champions League final." But to your point, Tuchel is sort of the very antithesis of Bielsa at Leeds, where that's a guy where it's perceived where it's just a talent and he's basically just rolling out the balls. And maybe that's not totally fair either. But I absolutely buy that Bielsa is doing better coaching at Leeds than Thomas Tuchel is at PSG.
There we go. Well, then I'm okay with it because of the way you just framed it. You did it a whole lot better than I did. And look, I'm not saying that it doesn't require talent and a skill set, and actually a very unique talent and skill set to coach and to have the best players in the world actually function as a team. Undeniably that there is value to that. But I just think there usually isn't, but there should be given more value to somebody that is able to make average players play great, as opposed to great players play greater. And I do think that in the modern day, coaching them up is lost. The first question that anybody asks is, how much money do I have? And that's where your expectations are. And who can I buy? We need to change this. Okay, fine. And I get it, because that is the easiest and quickest way to do it. But I would think that most coaches got in because they believed that they could do things that others couldn't, that they could take a player and make that player better than somebody else, given the exact same player. So, all right, what else, Mosse?
That's
when
it
comes to Champions League. Nothing. That starts. What's Tuesday and Wednesday this week, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, oh yes, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we're back. Time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there on all the social media platforms, and we pick a few each week, as we did this week. Mosse, what do the people want to know about this week?
First up, at EL_S21, or is it E1_S21? What's your take on USA national team thus far?
Okay, EL, or whatever robot that you actually are. So you didn't specify which national team, which gives me an opportunity, an opening to talk about both national teams. We saw the return of actually the U.S. Women's national team this week. They didn't miss a beat. They didn't look particularly rusty. They just confirmed and reaffirmed how great they are and how much talent that Vlatko Andonovski has at his disposal coaching the U.S. women. They went into not only Europe, but went into the Netherlands and handily beat the Netherlands, a team, if you remember, was the opponent in the final of the last World Cup. A lot of the usual suspects out there on the field, and your Saubrunns and your Julie Ertz and Rose Lavelle, who can't start necessarily in England where she's playing, but she can start and score bangers for the national team. Listen, error in goal. We saw the return of Alex Morgan after a long layoff with a pregnancy, so it was good to see her back on the field. And like I said, they didn't miss a beat. So I think you're in good hands with Vlatko, and the future looks bright and even brighter as they head into what a future hopefully has a Olympics next summer for the women, the next big tournament, with some added additions here or there and some subtractions possibly. We didn't see Megan Rapinoe or Carly Lloyd. Don't know what their involvement is. They seem to be going forward as if they are going to be involved, but it might not be up to them ultimately, and the team may have moved on. When it comes to the U.S. men's national team, there is a game that has been scheduled for later on in December against El Salvador. We know we saw this team come off of the 2 games in Europe where they looked very, very good, but with mostly European-based players against Panama, a win against Panama, and the tie against Wales. They're going to play against El Salvador. That will be a largely domestic team, and I'm really excited actually to see who Greg Berhalter brings in. Some of it will be limited because MLS playoffs will still be going on. But for the most part, we're going to see a lot of I would think, guys like Daryl Dike and Chris Mueller and Ibobasi, these types of players. Let me think of some other things. Aaron, I don't know if Brendan Aronson will be there. McKenzie. These types of players, but this will be an opportunity for Greg Berhalter to assess a whole new crop, and in particular, possible goal scorers up top to add to some of the things that we are finding. But it is a weak spot there going forward. So, all in all, I think we are ending 2020, that was kind of a lost year for both teams, still on a high and still on in a moment of optimism. That when it comes to the men's team, I don't think we have seen in a real long time, and certainly not to this level, maybe even ever. And when it comes to the women's team, as I said, just a confirmation that we are badasses, and we will continue to be so as long as we don't rest on our laurels. And it doesn't look like that we have. As a matter of fact, it looks like we're only going to get better, which is great, because their brand is based on winning and crushing and being the best in the world. And it looks like that they are going to continue to be that for at least the foreseeable future. Next question, Mosse.
At A. Robinson, 1987, would you say Luis Suarez is one of the greatest number 9s in history, perhaps top 5?
Okay, so first off, let's define number 9. I know that the numbers sometimes get obscured and bastardized in the game today. And please correct me if I'm wrong. The way that I see it and define this, Mosse, is especially nowadays where very few teams actually play with 2 up top. For the most part, they play with 1 or 3, but there's one kind of central player. I would define that as your most advanced striker, forward, and we call it a number 9 traditionally. The tip of that spear. You're talking about in the modern day, someone like a Luis Suarez, someone like a Lewandowski. These types of players that are Zlatan. These types of players that occupy that central spot. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're always posting up, but many of them are bigger in stature and do a lot of that. Have I defined it correctly, Mosse, to your liking?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So because when we start talking about the best ever, then it gets a little different and strange. For example, from your Brazilian standpoint, would you consider Romario a number 9?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. But, you had that Bebeto type of tandem and stuff going around. Anyway, would you consider Pele a number 9?
Not like an out and out traditional number 9, no.
Okay. Would you consider Marco van Basten?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, these are some of the names that are going to come up. Eusebio. So does Luis Suarez join that company? He is in a strange way. He's not as graceful and as cultured a player, and that shouldn't hurt him because from a production standpoint, he does what ultimately your job is up there, and that is to score goals. And he's done it at a consistent level for country and club. And so I want to put him up there, but I fear that he's not going to be considered one of the all-time greats. Is that unfair to him to not consider him, Mosse?
Oh, yes, I think he's definitely an all-time great. Now, top 5, I don't think he quite makes it there for me. There are players that maybe haven't scored as many goals as he has, but we're more transcendent players to me, like the Brazilian Ronaldo and Marco van Basten, 2 guys who had injuries. And so maybe, he's going to finish with better career totals than them. But I'm sorry, those 2 guys to me were more transcendent players. You mentioned Romario. If you want to go back to guys like Gerd Muller and Puskás. So I think in the whole history of the game, I could certainly find 5 guys that I would rank above Luis Suarez. But to me, more interestingly, it's looking at in the context of his generation, because we've talked about on this podcast how Messi and Ronaldo cast such a shadow with their goal scoring exploits that we tend to overlook the fact that we've lived in sort of a golden age of center forwards the last 15 years or so. You could everywhere from Zlatan to Benzema to Lewandowski to Suarez to Aguero to Cavani to Aubameyang, and guys who have had really great careers. And sort of debating where Suarez ranks in that list is kind of interesting to me. And I think very high. He has that thing you love of doing it in different leagues. He's sort of a legendary figure at 2 different giant clubs, Liverpool and Barcelona. Also, club and country. He Uruguay's all-time leading scorer with 60-something goals and did it in World Cups. He's had some signature performance in World Cups, that double against England in 2014 in Sao Paulo. I think he's had a phenomenal career. He is an all-time great. I mean, the ultimate testament to Luis Suarez is this is a man who on 3 different occasions in his career has bit an opponent, and yet he's such a great player that's become kind of a footnote in his career.
All right. So if we're talking our 5, then I would have Ronaldo. I would have Zlatan. I would have Lewandowski. I know that's probably sacrilege. And to your point, maybe some of these players are hurt because of the national teams that they play on. Lewandowski for Poland and even Suarez for Uruguay. If they were playing for, Germany or Argentina or Brazil, they might be looked at maybe a little bit differently. So I had Zlatan there. Who else would you put in the 5, Mosse? Who else would you have in your 5?
Who have you named so far?
Ronaldo, Zlatan, Lewandowski, Eusebio. This is all time, right?
Gerd Muller's scoring record is bonkers. I think you got to put him in there.
And I put Romario.
And by the way, this is your list.
A little bit. Who do you have?
I don't have a list prepared. I feel ambushed by Alex Dowd with this. So this is going to be ALEXI LALAS's top 5.
I'll tell you what. We will come back to it next week. We will have our list.
All right,
okay.
Fair enough.
All right. We will come back. So this is our homework for the week. Okay. We will find a top 5 in there. I've already teased you as to what I have, but I can also be convinced and persuaded and talked out of some of the selections that I have, like Zlatan or Lewandowski or whoever. Okay, what else, Mosse?
And we'll end on this, a fun one. At Landy Cakes, what TV show should be my next Netflix binge?
It might be Landy Cakes, okay, with a Z instead of an S. All right. Well, look, we didn't talk about our viewing at the beginning of the show out of respect for just getting to the Maradona discussion immediately, and I think we were right to do that. But we can pick it up here, Mosse. This gives us a wonderful little opportunity here. Okay, so you had mentioned The Undoing a few weeks ago. And I succumbed to your pressure. And not only did I, but also my wife did. And the final episode aired last night. So I was able to see the whole thing in a very short period of time. It's worth the time. I'm not going to give anything away. I was extremely disappointed with the finale. It is a whodunit. I was extremely disappointed with the finale. I thought that in general, it was too long. It ended up being 6 episodes. And it could have been condensed, I think, into what would have been a much more interesting type of situation. But that was really, really good.
Although we should say that's HBO. The question.
Sorry, that's HBO. Netflix. I mean, but
okay, little minor detour there. We're still talking television.
Yeah. So let's go. Actually, I'll get a couple more HBOs too. The Mystery of D.B. Cooper. For people that don't know, it's an incredible story of a hijacking that occurred in the 70s, and in Cascadia up there in the Northwest, and a hijacker got on a plane, demanded ransom, was paid money, and proceeded to parachute out of a 737 from low altitude into the night. He was never found and or identified, and it goes through potential suspects, and he, to this day, is the only unsolved hijacking in American history. So that's a pretty good one. That's just a straight ahead hour and a half type of documentary. The other one was something called Class Action Park, which is a documentary about a water park that existed back in the 70s and 80s in New Jersey, and just the madness and the mayhem and the danger that existed in terms of how this park was run. And while on the surface, it's about this generational type of thing and experiential type of thing at a water park, there's also the fact that people actually died in these amusement rides that were part of the water park, and it goes into a lot of that. So it's got a lot of different layers, and I recommend it highly. As far as Netflix, I think you have your classics that if you haven't seen, you should see: The Making of the Murderers, and that type of Keepers, those types of things that are still on, if I'm not mistaken. Bingeable type of stuff. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I'm at now, I don't know, season 5 or 6 of, I don't know how many seasons there are of Community. And now it has jumped the shark. And yet now I'm in that position where I can't just completely give up on it. Now it's just a matter of pride that I have to finish it, even though it is veered off into ridiculous territory. So those are some things out there that I think should be in your viewing. Mosse, what about you?
Well, first off, for the record, I enjoyed the Undoing finale, so we disagree on that.
Ridiculous finale.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I've watched a disturbing amount of television this year, and before the year's out, we'll probably do some end of year lists, and I'll do a full blown list of my favorite shows. But keeping it to this guy's question of just Netflix, and keeping it to just shows that I've watched on Netflix in 2020, because I could go back to the Masters of None and Peaky Blinders and stuff like that where there hasn't been a new season in 2020, but there are also very good Netflix shows. But just keeping it to 2020 on Netflix. Obviously, the most recent phenomenon there is this Queen's Gambit, which is a mini series that we've talked about on this podcast. It's just 7 episodes, so you can whip through that fairly quickly. In terms of like several season shows that you can binge for a couple of weeks, I did Better Call Saul, which is on Netflix. I binged 5 seasons of that. There's one more, season 6 coming, so you can binge it now and get caught up before the final season. I binged all 3 seasons of Ozark. There's one more of those coming, season 4. So again, you can binge it to get caught up. I binged all the seasons of Fauda. Absolutely love that show. And I watched new seasons, which dropped this year, of Narcos, which is a show I love if you're interested in sort of drug cartel stuff. And then The Crown, which just wrapped up season 4, a show I absolutely love if you're a history buff, if you're interested at all in the British royal family and all that. So those are some recommendations. If you're looking for like lengthier shows that have been on for several seasons and kind of one of those longer binges that you can, like I said, it takes up 2-3 weeks of your life. So those would be some of my Netflix recommendations from 2020.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll have a more formal type of list at some point later on to kind of round out the year. Okay, Mosse, that's it for Ask Alexi, right?
Yep.
All right, we're going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, oh yes, my one for the road. All right, welcome back. Time to end the show, and at the end of each show, as you know, I give you my one for the road. And this week is the phenomenon that is, and I guess was, of Sarah Fuller. Who is Sarah Fuller, you might ask? Many of you may know because she burst on our consciousness over this last few days as the kicker for Vanderbilt football, American football team. She is the goalkeeper for the Vanderbilt women's team, coming off of a successful season, including being SEC champions. She was recruited in after the Vanderbilt football team was unable, because of COVID and injury and whatever, to field I guess they call them field goal kickers and point after kickers and kicker offers. I don't know if that's an actual jargon term, Mosse, is it? What do they call them?
I'm sorry, what do they call what?
What do they call the kickers? What's the difference between the punter who punts the ball in American football?
Yeah, place kicker.
Okay, she's a place kicker. Is what I'm saying. So anyway, we come to find out that she is suited up and ready to go for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, as a football team, soccer team, women's team, very, very good. Football team, men's American football, not so good. 0-7. And they were traveling to Missouri. So from a soccer perspective, we have a soccer player, and not just a soccer player, but a female soccer player who is set to potentially make history going on the field in a men's collegiate football game here. This was equal parts amazing and to some, I would say, probably cringeworthy because of what was perceived as a gimmicky type of situation. Look, anytime you have an opportunity like this for a team like Vanderbilt, who people know, but look, I'd never cared or thought about Vanderbilt football, okay, until this actually came on my radar. And that's exactly what it was designed to do. And this isn't to say that that Sarah Fuller can't kick the ball. We saw her kicking the ball. We saw her in warm-up kicking the ball. And this also isn't to say that there weren't possibly other players that could kick it better. But she was given the opportunity, and in doing so, she was given the opportunity to make history. She did make history, not in the form of a field goal, because Vanderbilt is so horrible at football that they didn't even get close enough for her to even attempt a field goal. And so the only time that we actually saw her kick was kicking off for the second half, a moment in which she was actually asked to strategically kind of squib it and line drive it out into an area and then run off the field. Look, it doesn't matter how big or small, history is history. And she made history, and she was put on the consciousness of the American public out there. And a lot of people that, as I said, could care less about Vanderbilt, could care less about even of collegiate football. And yet she was there bringing attention to it. I'm not as cynical as others are. I recognize that the only reason that I cared about this game was because of this anomaly and this strange and new type of thing, and something we had never seen before. And it was wonderful. And I watched the entire game simply to watch this woman kick the football. And she had that moment, and she was celebrated, and rightfully so. The interesting thing is that the day after, the head coach was fired because by the way, they lost that game 41-0, which meant that they went to 0-8. The head coach was fired. And I had somebody ask me this morning was the coach fired because of all the national and international attention that this, I know I don't want to call it a gimmick, but this decision elicited. And I said, no, the coach was fired because the coach lost football games. Now, that I even know that the coach was fired was caused solely because the coach decided to play Sarah Fuller. And in a certain way, if you're used, but you're used in a way that makes history, I can live with that. If you're used, but you're used in a way that does something that is going to help somebody, whether it's young boys or young girls that are looking up to this in this moment, I'm good with it. But I will say that the attention that it brought and the way that it highlighted how bad that team actually was to a lot of people that never would have been aware of it, like myself. I don't know. Was it worth it? Is what I'm asking Vanderbilt. I don't know. They can only answer that, because now I'm going to go back to not caring about it anymore. And the only thing that I know is that the team is bad. The coach got fired. And this moment of history happened. So congratulations to Sarah Fuller. She's the one that ends up looking the best out of all of this. And I hope that she continues on to have success on the field when it comes to soccer, and on the field if she continues to be given the opportunity to kick. We don't know if that's going to happen. And off the field and whatever she ends up doing. But nobody can ever take that away from you in terms of making that history. And I saw it, and I will forever remember it. Mosse, anything to say before we head out of here?
That's it.
All right. As always, we appreciate you tuning in, whether you're watching, whether you're listening, downloading, subscribing, rating, reviewing, doing all of those things. I know we went a little bit long today, but you get a little bit more in 2020. That's kind of how it's playing out here in this crazy year that we have. Plenty of soccer this week. I hope everybody enjoys it, including, like I said, myself and Mosse working on MLS Playoffs coming up this week. So all sorts of stuff to sink our teeth into when it comes to the game that we know and love. All right, we'll talk again next week. And until then, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.